resource usage, etc. And we now have multiple examples and case studies that show this is all about business risk. Now, we all know the business risk is at the using end, but it turns out there's business risk on the development side as well. It actually costs you, in terms of resources, to fix things late in that life cycle. You want to be able to do it. So it's lost opportunity, and in some cases liability, business costs related to outages, breaches, corrupted data, and damaging incidents. So automated technical debt measures, it's a weighted effort. There's a sum of efforts to fix all instances. We actually say, here's the price of what it would actually take to do that. You literally can sum it up, and we can predict the effort required for corrective maintenance, and you can therefore predict the cost of corrective maintenance versus the cost of having to just fix it up front. It gets much more expensive down the road. And these SIS measures are actually aligned with the things that we all have come to love, right? It's the NIST cybersecurity framework. Numerous processes in there, if you want to look just at some of the examples, with the empirical risk tolerance threshold for software security, it's in the risk assessment. Contractual SLAs, and the audits for software security, supply chain risk management. So you have these controls in the NIST cybersecurity framework that map to what we can collect in software. We can identify you have these flaws in software, therefore you're not conformant with what you're trying to do with the framework. And we've done something extra within Synopsys. We actually, with our Coverity tool now running on Polaris, is our integrated platform. Multiple tools give you reports. One of the reports we have, I realize it's the best printing. I just pulled this off of one of the printouts. We report technical risk indicators. Now what these are, it's a way of saying we've ran a scan of your software and we have a collection. We see these CWEs. So long as these CWEs are present in that software, they represent source vectors for somebody without authorization to modify data. These CWEs, these represent source vectors for somebody without authorization to execute a command. You understand the language I'm using here? This is something you can take to your bosses. People who don't even understand software say, you know, that's bad. If somebody can modify data or execute a command, but we can literally read and scan and find CWEs, and they represent those source vectors. The intent here is to translate software issues into business risk. Because until you can convince upper management you have a business risk, they're not going to necessarily give you additional resources to go fix things. So we give you reports now that says, go to your boss and talk to his boss. Because that's what you're doing. You're putting it in terms that people understand. And too often that's what we're finding is people didn't know how to translate that. You know, when you try to tell a boss, hey, we found a buffer overrun here. So?
That's a low severity crime, come back in 6 months.
Yeah, big deal. It's like, no. It's like I said, so long as you have that weakness, they can come in and execute command without authorization. They know that's bad. So software testing really is a way of providing insight to what you're doing. That's really what's doing. You don't test your way into security, but you test to make sure that you have implemented the security controls and that you've actually made software not exploitable. And we know that in today's environment, it's constantly evolving, but it's got to be very fast-paced. We know today we've got new attack vectors from embedded IoT, cloud, mobile, open source. We've got shorter product life cycles. I mean, everybody's moving. You're going agile, continuous integration, continuous deployment, DevOps, and we're focusing on DevSecOps. You've got containers for your cloud security. You know, you've got all of this happening. Our development environments have to respond very quickly, and there's increasing complexity with all the tools, the languages that are out there, dependencies, and this supply chain of third party. And that's where I mentioned earlier that today the majority of software is composed, or it's assembled. And that's why we talk about third party. There is some original software, but even in your development environment, there's a lot of composition that's going on. By the way, that's a good thing, because reuse is a good thing, but there's certain risks that come with it, and too often our developers are unaware of that. And I'm going to talk about what are some of those risks and what we can do to avoid those. But these software components are coming in from third-party suppliers, Anytime you're pulling down from a library, that's a third-party supplier, like it or not. Up to 90% of an application today is composed of third-party software. My question to you, up to 90%. Up to 90%, because that third-party, free and open source software, it could be commercial off the shelf or internally developed. In your development team, that first-party code, it's the glue code, it's making that work. But like I said, up to 90% of some modern-day applications is actually third-party software. And the real question that we have to ask is, do you trust what's in your third-party software? Do you even know where it came from? Goes back to the original supply chain challenge. How can you gain trust in it if you don't even know where it came from? You know, this whole provenance and pedigree, it's like, this becomes a bit of a challenge for us. And you've heard a lot about open source. Open source is not the problem, I'm here to tell you. We actually did a study on this. And this year, Open Source Security and Risk Analysis Report. It's free to download. You get these slides later on, so you've got the URL here. But it was a study of over 1,200 commercial applications in the library. It found the majority still contain open source security vulnerabilities and license conflicts. I'll get into more details about what we mean by that. So this report shows 298 open source components were found in the average application. 68% of code bases contain open source license conflicts. And conflicts mean it's not consistent with what you're trying to do. There are actually some very restrictive open source licenses. It says, yes, this is free software. But if you use this open source component, you now have to make your software free. And if you don't do that, and your clients find out about it, and now you have to go tell your boss, your CEO, you know this software we've been making lots of money on? Either we have to give it away for free, or we have to pay this massive fine. Not the message you want to be telling your CEO. By the way, I named you a few large companies who that's already occurred. In this case, over 7,300 open source vulnerabilities were reported in 2018. 40% of code bases contained at least one high severity vulnerability. 43% contained vulnerabilities that are over 10 years old. And one was 28 years old. And this was a report that we took a look at that this year. But remember, the risk is not open source software, it's unpatched software. And the challenge that we find is that developers will go to a library, pull it down. It's almost like going to a refrigerator and there's two containers. One is spoiled milk, one is good milk. They take the spoiled milk and they use that. They go, oh, what's wrong with this? It's like, well, you didn't check it. They're not even checking, they're thinking it's in a library and must be good for me to use. Your developers are not checking what they're using. Unless your company has policies about how you check, and some companies have gotten much better now about how they use and control the use of open source libraries. So understand that today, it is a software management effort. Software is a supply chain risk management activity because virtually all software we're finding is somewhat buggy because we're dealing with a lot of legacy code. It's just a matter of how many exploitable weaknesses and vulnerabilities are in your systems and devices. You can measure that, you can use tools to check that. Input processing can be exploited. Now, that also is part of your software, but this is for network interfaces, device drivers, user interfaces. There's a lot of things. You have to understand, the hackers are doing the scanning for you. They are doing binary analysis and fuzzing to attack your systems, and they're not asking your permission, but they're doing it. So the question is if the hackers are doing it, why aren't we doing it in our development environments? Why aren't we looking for known vulnerabilities? Why aren't we fuzzing to determine the resiliency of our products? Because these can be discovered and mitigated by our suppliers. Why aren't we more demanding of that of our suppliers? Why aren't we more demanding of our own development teams? These should be used as test criteria. CVEs and CWEs should be part of your test regime. If you're not doing it, it's like, it's a wasted opportunity. I mean, it's free. These are free standards. It's like, you gotta be looking at those. And you should be demanding it of your suppliers. So we have different techniques to address different risks. And static analysis is used for analyzing source code. It finds the common security vulnerabilities, the CWEs. You know, SQL injection, cross-site scripting, Buffalo. It's best for proprietary software. Software composition analysis. All these, I'm going to talk a little bit more about what these are. It scans for open source, finds open source vulnerabilities, detects known vulnerabilities, and it certainly is best for that. And then dynamic analysis, it's on running apps, it's finding vulnerabilities and the application behavior, so they're looking for misconfigurations, authentication issues, business flow. And certainly within our toolkits that we offer from Synopsys, we've got Coverity, Black Duck, Defense Extend, or Seeker in this space to be able to cover that. That's just what we do. We run our tools on ourselves. That's, I talked about earlier on, we're very big with all the software we've got for electronic design automation, IP. We actually run these tools on our own tools internally within our software integrity group, just to find out what they're doing. So software composition analysis is needed. It may or not be something that you've ever heard of. If you've ever heard us talking about a need for a software bill of materials. When we do software composition analysis, and we've done that with Black Duck, we actually give you a bill of materials. What is in your software? That's the first thing. But it also gives you a vulnerability assessment and tracking. What known CVEs are in there? The vulnerabilities that you're looking for. It talks about license management, helps us with export compliance, which is very key from a business perspective. But that bill of materials, to me, is the best thing that software composition analysis gives you. Because what that is, it's essentially helping you identify code genetics. Because it's the ingredients list. It's your application, because that means the proprietary code, the open source components, API usage, application behavior. That's what you're getting. It's application facts. What do I have here? If you're trying to do asset management for your organization and you don't have a bill of materials for your individual assets, when a new threat comes out, is it applicable to you? How would you know? But if somebody says, this threat is going after Apache Struts, which happened with Equifax, they didn't know where they had all the instances of it. So some of them didn't get patched. And then a major exploit. They didn't know. So how can you do asset management if you don't have a bill of materials for your IT assets? I'm always curious how, do you do it because we have a server there. That's the name of that asset. What's in that server? Wouldn't you like to know? Again, that's why you get a software bill of materials. What we internally, for our company, why it's so important to us, why we use software composition analysis, it doesn't just help our third-party risk management activities where we're bringing a software from somebody else. It helps our development teams. But it also helps our legal team because it helps us in ensuring our licensing and our IP and the export control compliance. It helps us know if we've got any restrictive IP licenses so that we make sure that we redo that. That helps us down that road to be able to do that. So it helps a broad range of people, from corporate security to purchasing, product security, but legal as well. If you're not doing software composition analysis, you're really missing an opportunity. Actually, as a side, we actually support a lot of mergers and acquisition activities. When you think about law firms come in, they do due diligence. One company wants to buy another company. This company says, oh, we've got all these assets. They come in, they run Black Duck on it. It says, oh, yes, they have all those assets. 60% of those assets are open source. Free and open source components, but they claim that's theirs. Okay, that's interesting facts. What's it worth now? Oh, by the way, they've got some highly restrictive licenses there that are going to put you, Mr. Acquiring Organization, at risk. What's that worth to you now? Oh, and by the way, it's got all of these known vulnerabilities in it. When Marriott purchased the whole Starboard fleet, they had been breached. Marriott purchased them without understanding that. Marriott's still paying for that. So if you use software composition analysis, if you're just looking at somebody else's code, something gives you a much better position on dealing with these. Yes, sir?
So I infer from what you just said that not only does Black Duck look at, call it the technical composition of these in-sourced repository components
Right.
themselves, but it also is able to automatically analyze the license terms and
Yes.
conditions.
Yeah. I should have given you a whole list here,
Yeah, I mean, because that's
It's not-
significant.
It is. And so our report, I should, I don't do marketing sales, I'm sorry, Ed. So I should have brought you a report that says, here, we'll actually give you examples of that here's certain licenses that are very egregious that we need to address now. We've done that internally on ourselves. Don and I were in a meeting, we said, look what we got there. We need to go, it helped us focus, go fix this.
I love it.
I will say that I have seen from one of your competitors, which was Sonotite.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're aware of it.
Yeah.
They also produce a nice report.
Right.
Very useful.
Yes. So it gives you insight that you need. You can't possibly do this on your own. It doesn't scale. If you think you've got individuals who can go in and read code, are they even aware of all the different open source licenses that are out there? So that's what you do. So there's numerous studies that say catching defects early saves money. You all know that, but we can give you more studies if you need that. But the idea is, by catching defects early, you put it in the developer's desktop. I mean, one of the tools with Coverity, we actually have, for lack of a better term, it's like a spell checker. Your developers are going along, they're keying in new code, and they go, eh. CWE. It actually shows you the path, says here's what the CWE is, and here is the recommended mitigation. It's like a spell checker for your developers to do that. So we can generate the ROI for your organization just by showing you the defects that are found just at the development teams. You know, give it to them. You know, the idea is that, tools can be expensive. And actually, it's really expensive when you don't have the tools. There was Forrester did a report, did an analysis of looking at one of our customers who was using two different of our tools. They were using Coverity and Defensix, so the static code analysis and fuzzy. And I'm just showing you this as a framework that you ought to take a look at if you ever need to justify why using tools. So even though the tools are expensive, well, no, it actually more than paid for itself right away. This one particular customer, they avoided remediation expenses in 8 code bases of 1.5 million lines of code each, saving over $3.86 million just in that first year. Way more than paid for it, the tools. So it lowered the defect density within its code base, preventing future costs of allowing error-prone code to be reused. And quite frankly, when you put code in here, it's not surprising to see that code being reused in your other products. And so they avoided that. It reduced time to market. Interesting. Because a lot of people say, well, security takes longer. But the case studies actually demonstrate just the opposite. By building security in, by designing security in up front, it saves time to market. And the reason is because it reduces your product release cycle, in this case, from 12 to 8 months. It enabled the company to redirect resources towards other productive activities. Activities decrease time to detect or remediate these defects and vulnerabilities. The idea that security costs more is coming from people who've never done it. Those of us who've done it can demonstrate it's just the opposite. Yes, there is an upfront cost of investing in this, but it pays for itself right away. It prevented a high breach profiles. It kept their CEO out of the news. Lowered future risk exposure attributable to exploitable software, and mitigated costly post-deployment malfunctions. Required 2 times fewer labor hours than the post-release phase. And this is where even companies like Microsoft will tell you they save a lot of money by addressing this up front, because even they don't save money by every time a new defect is identified. Because if you don't think you got it right in the development phase, do you know how much extra effort it takes for them to spin up a team to go find a patch, get that, and deploy it? So the numbers speak for themselves. 136% return on investment. Cost to find and fix bugs was down 2 to 10 months. Time to release new products was down 4 months. So security not only doesn't cost you more, it also doesn't take you longer. And so we fully realize that there is no Uber tool. So we actually have a toolkit. And when I say toolkit, that involves, it's got tools, but we also have methods. So we range all the way from the planning side. Build security and maturity models now out to version 12, I think, right now. The test optimization, we have architectural risk analysis, threat modeling. But then you bring in the tools for implementation, the types that you use, depending on the type of technology that you're deploying, to help you implement, verify, release, and then respond. And it's just something that we do. Now, I will tell you, for some organizations, it's hard to start focusing more on security. But you can start by nurturing that security mindset by translating cybersecurity principles into developer-centric terms, to be able to do that. One of the ways that you do is seek to embed security and technical risk management into your development culture by making security a mindset and a fixture of daily practices. I could go through this whole list, but the bottom one here is probably the most important. Your let tools are loaded with security domain checkers under the hood do the work, leaving engineers to primarily tackle findings as part of their typical defect management. It's just like what we do in all quality management. We deal with defects. So you could be doing this just as part of your, I think quality assurance teams are the best positioned to be able to do this. But you don't have to think that you have to make all of your quality assurance people, or even all your developers, security experts. They have to be armed with tools that do this for them. They just have to now know to do something with it. By the way, one of the things I like to do when I'm teaching classes, I come into graduate and undergraduate classes, and you know, I asked the question, and these are cybersecurity classes, and I said, so I suspect all of you are programmers, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I do. So how many of you disable compiler warning flags when you're deploying your software? Let's go up. I said, you know what you just did? They look at me. I said, I will tell you that today's modern day compilers, because we've worked with the compiler vendors. I've been doing this since when I was on the OSC staff, continued doing it. Under ISO IEC JTC1 SC22, there's a new working group that's been out there now for over 10 years, WG23, that deals with programming languages. Specifically, WG23 deals with vulnerabilities in programming languages. Not surprisingly, all the compiler vendors are members of this. New modern day compilers are now using CWEs as a way of giving you warnings. Developers are getting annoyed by them. So my question to you, if you're bringing in any software to somebody's development, even if it's on your internal development teams, ask them, did you enable all compiler warning flags? And did you disable any compiler warning flags? The first answer they'll give you is, you don't care about that. You do. You care about that because they have a tool right there. The compiler gives them a warning that's based on security. But they're annoyed by that, so they disable it. But if management started asking the question that said, and said, for the code being delivered, all compiler warnings must be up, and none of them were disabled for any future development. If that is a huge development change. And by the way, you don't need to go out and buy the tools because the compiler is there for you. You've already worked. So automated application security tools, particularly vulnerability scanners and static analysis tools, enable bringing security to non-security professionals. Again, that's what you want to be able to do that. So remember, ISO 25000 series, security is a subset of quality. Treat it that way. Not this idea of somebody else deals with security. No, you deal with defects. These are quality defects, the fact that they're security related, really not much different than a reliability defect. Keep that in mind to be able to do that. And it's by setting this, you get people to start thinking, okay, this works. So what you're doing is setting aside the focus just on correctness and reviewing aspects that relate or impact correctness and functional reliability. This time, you're going to say, inject the security mindset by saying, this works and looks correct, but can it be intentionally made to do something concerning? This works and looks correct, but what about the edge cases and the binary conditions? What about the ramifications if it fails to operate correctly? If your people just start thinking about this, you can say it's quality related, but it's certainly more than pure functionality to do that. And let's see. This was just, and I'm going to give you the slide deck. These are just questions for making security more part of your design analysis. And then finally, and starting to wrap up here, I want you to think of using procurement. Remember I was saying at the beginning here, I was telling you that's a bit of a challenge space because they're measured on other things. What if we started putting in procurement requirements or independent testing or even certification? So we've actually done that. We've actually published language. We have a free resource. It's called Procurement Language for Supply Chains Cyber Assurance. You can go to our website. It's free. What it looks at is product development specification policies, your security program, system protection, access control, product testing and verification, deployment, and maintenance. So it's a free download, be able to get that. But what's interesting is now the financial sector came out with a report on supply chain, well, it was actually entitled Cyber Insurance Buying Guide. And they have a annex to it that says supply chain cyber insurance, procurement requirements. And this is what they're recommending to all financial institutions. And if you look at the titles, it's exactly the same thing that I just talked about, what we've got in our guide, where when you go into the breakdown of product testing verification, they're going to look at communication robustness testing, software composition analysis, static code analysis, dynamic runtime analysis. Gee, where have I heard these before? A bill of materials. This is the recommendation for those who are looking for cyber insurance of saying, no, you've got to look at cyber assurance and make sure you're doing this with your software vendors. So financial institutions get it. By the way, the energy sector is now doing this. Automotive industry's picked this up as well. And now the FDA is doing it as well. In fact, when you look at certification, we've worked with Underwriters Labs in this area. For years, when I was in the Software and Supply Chain Assurance Forum, I said, we need a UL-like certification for software. So I met with them, met with UL, and we talked about what would a cybersecurity assurance program look like. So UL, you understand who UL is? I mean, every electronic device that you've got here, you've got a little UL sticker on it. Do you realize that today, insurance companies, if you have an accident and you're using a device that doesn't have that UL mark on it, it's like, you made a mistake. And that's starting to be true now. So UL is now starting to do cyber resilience. They're looking for these same things in their cybersecurity assurance program. And we started with, it's all about network connectable devices. We started with industrial control systems and medical devices. Yep. Today, the FDA recognizes UL 2900 series. It's part 2 that deals with medical devices. That's part of the way of certifying, independently certifying medical devices to be cyber assured. So,
just a quick
yeah.
aside. UL is obviously very important, but like the Five Belows and the dollar stores, if you buy an electronic component from there, they are not UL.
They're not UL. You're right. And so, like I said, if you have a fire and it was because you plugged in a device and it's not UL certified, who's at fault? And think about that. So, in the future, companies will have a choice of buying IoT devices. Those that are UL certified, and those that are not. An accident will occur. What do you think the insurance company's going to ask? You had the right to choose that. Did you choose wisely? So that's where I see this playing out. Insurance companies are going to really make a difference in that. So you have to understand, this whole thing's a journey. You don't day one say, okay, today we are going to be secure. It doesn't happen that way. What we're seeing is that at first organizations become very reactive, and that's fine. And what you should be doing some pen testing. But that is reactive, because that's down the line. It's not early stage here. So it's compliance driven. It's because my customer's making me do it. I mean, that's typically what we see. But if you get to be a little bit more proactive in this, and you're able to scale it, you're bringing in tools to augment internal teams with external resources for scalability. Sometimes you don't have all the right people. There's many companies, ours is one of them, provide managed services and professional services that can supplement your team with the intent of, you need to build this team yourself, but in the interim, we can help you do that. And you integrate it with DevOps, so it's DevSecOps to be able to do that. And you're identifying and prioritizing vulnerabilities for remediation. And finally, as part of that, to optimize, you're really programmatically managing a risk across the entire software releases for all of your products. You're driving efficiency through your software development lifecycle integration, and you have a purposeful blend of automated and manual testing processes. Because at the end of the day, while tools aren't the be-all and end-all, you can't do this without tools. You simply cannot scale. It's a matter of being able to try to do that. As I mentioned earlier, I'm on the governing board for CISC. CISC is free to join. I'd highly recommend that you do that. Join those of us who've been working in this space for a long time. There's the website. You can go on there and do that. I talked about all the measures for technical debt, and you can download all that material to be able to do that to help you better understand that. We're proud of the fact that Gartner has put us in the leader in the Magic Quadrant for application security testing this year. And Forrester has done that both for our static analysis tools as well as our software composition analysis. One of the major reasons I chose to join this company is because I saw them acquiring all these other companies that had the best of breed tools. But more specifically, it was a company that was committed to continuing to improve those tools and to integrate them on a single platform, and we now have the Polaris platform to be able to do that. So we offer the integrated tools, the managed services, professional services. We help companies build your own strategy to do that. And we've been very successful at doing that, so I'm happy to be in that company. So I truly believe that today we have capability to build secure, high-quality software, but we can do it faster. And we understand you're still going to hear people complaining that they can't do it. But it's because they're not trying. And is all I'm asking you, you should try. Just try some of this stuff, and if you ever need help, and even justifying to upper management, like I said, we gave you a lot of reports on here, we can help you justify it as well. This is something we can actually control. Appreciate the time of coming out here. We should have beer.
Excellent.
Just want to present a little token of our appreciation for you speaking tonight. Thank you, thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Really appreciate it.
Go home, plug that into your USB.
Okay.
Not an electronic.
Static analysis on it.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate the opportunity. I actually like speaking to audiences like this because, number one, you already appreciate the value of this. I just hope that I can give you something that you can go and convince your bosses why you need to be able to do more of this.
Thank you.
You're saying in digits, right? Digits?
Yeah, so I need probably, I sent you a version, then I added some more slides, but feel free
Send me
to.
the version.
Okay.
And then we'll post it in the next couple of days.
Okay. Happy to do that.
Yeah, excellent presentation.
Just, again, if you have any trash, just please dispose of it in the receptacles back here. Again, I want to thank Alex Pryor for hosting us tonight. He's back there.
Hey.
Thank you, Alex.
Hey, stand up.
Thank you, Alex.
And feel free to follow up with me if you've got any questions. My contact details are on there as well, or I can give you a card, whatever.
Excellent. And our next meeting is October 15th.
2 meetings, right? And October 21st.
Yes, October 15th and October 21st.
So the third Tuesday and
And the fourth Monday.
fourth Monday. Some Monday. The Monday after the third Tuesday.
Yeah, the information will be on the website as well as in your email. So as long as you signed up to get the CPE credits, we have your email, so you will get the blast via email as well.
Is everybody here a member of our LinkedIn group? We have a LinkedIn group. It's called ISSA National Capital Chapter. So look us up there too, because we're going to try and do a better job announcing stuff there as well.